Glad to know you're still with us. A recent Bloomfield report outlines challenges in Nigeria's power sector, including liquidity issues, economic instability, and impact of consumption subsidies, which may lead to electricity tariff reviews in 2025. I'm not sure anybody wants to hear that. With over 1 trillion naira owed to power companies, the government faces pressure to reform the subsidy regime. The report highlights key upcoming reforms, including the National Integrated Electricity Policy and Strategic Implementation Plan and the implementation of the Energy Transition Plan. It also forecasts a shift toward renewable energy driven by increased adoption of solar and battery technologies. Well, Olalere Odusote, energy and energy policy consultant, joins me to unpack this. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Thank you for having me.
All right, well, this is more like a review and overview of the power sector in the country. So based on this, I'd like you to first give us an overview of the sector, or maybe a review or your assessment of the sector so far, especially looking at, the year 2024 as the base year.
All right, thank you. Not much has changed in the sector over the past 10 years in terms of the ability of the sector to generate funding. What's shifted dramatically is the constitutional amendment that has devolved the power for regulation of electricity matters from strictly the federal government to a shared responsibility with the state government. What we have now is a situation where 36 state governments are looking at setting up separate electricity markets within their states and regulating those markets and ensuring that electricity gets to everybody in the states. Now, for 73 years, we've had a centrally managed electricity sector that has not delivered electricity. And the hope is that when the states start to create their markets and make laws closer to the consumers of electricity, then that should improve. What the states are likely to then do is to adopt a framework that encourages investment into the power sector, because what we have today is a significant lack of investment that's driven by the inability of the sector to repay its any capital investment or to provide returns for any capital investments that's made in the sector. Increasingly, I think 3 states so far have finalized a transition from federally administered regulation to state administered regulations, even though there are teething problems with those as well. But what's happening is the understanding of the states that providing a subsidy at the state level is just going to distort the economics of the market and ensure that the players are not running their business as they should. As the states are finding out that they cannot afford the subsidies, they're starting to encourage the people who are interested in the sector to look at it as a profit-making venture rather than a subsidy area, which then assumes that electricity is a social service, which it is not, which it should not be treated as if we want a sustainability in the sector. So that's what's been happening so far. In terms of renewables have been moving along, and it's perhaps the fastest growing sector of the economy. Of the energy industry. There are lots more from a base of 0. We're finding out that we're getting increasing numbers of solar installations from 0. For example, about 10 years ago in Lagos, currently it's estimated that we have about 100 megawatts, and that's growing fast. And I imagine that in the next couple of years, it will grow some more as the state starts to put together a framework that encourages the deployment of solar solutions. For example, the Lagos State Governor announced a couple of years ago a target of 1 gigawatt of solar installations by 2030, which is just about 5 years away from here. Now, if you understand that what we're getting from the grid in Lagos is about 1.2 gigawatts, and we're going to introduce a mix of 1 gigawatt of solar at that time, then you start to realize how important solar is going to become.
All right. I mean, you said a lot of things, but I want us to put certain things in context. I totally understand. I mean, from an investor, you want, a cost-reflective tariff. You want to be able to recoup, just like you said, that some of the people who invested have not been able to recoup their monies, and this is a challenge. And that's why we're saying a dearth in investment in the sector. But then, shouldn't electricity or power be seen as partly social and partly business? I mean, shouldn't there be a balance? Do you think government needs to hands up totally and make it all business? Seeing that there is actually no security, no safety security net in Nigeria, do we really have any safety security structure? I mean, this could be the only place where Nigerians would probably enjoy subsidy or something like that. What do you think?
It's interesting that you put it that way, but it's not correct. So Today, if you look at it, the per capita, if you look at the supply of electricity into Lagos, Lagos has, like I said, at peak, 1.2 gigawatts of electricity supply. If you then compare that to the amount of diesel generating capacity that's in Lagos, which is, I think, about 19.5 gigawatts of electricity generating capacity, then you ask yourself the question, are we really subsidizing, or are we just saying that we're subsidizing? So if 19.2 gigawatts exists, that's not subsidized, and 1.2 gigawatts exists, that is subsidized. Do we really have a subsidy in the sector? 1.2 gigawatts is not.
Maybe you shouldn't talk about Lagos alone. Maybe we look at other states also while talking about this. What about that?
Actually, Lagos is a microcosm of the country. So whatever is happening in Lagos, you can imagine, you can believe, best believe that is happening in the rest of the country. Whether you talk about Kano, Katsina, or Yola, there's simply not adequate supply of energy from the grid to power the market. And so what happens is we have a lot of diesel generating sets taking up the slack from the grid and ensuring that we have power. Now, from my last estimate, the amount of power that's supplied from the grid to the country, the ratio of the amount of power supplied from the grid to the amount of power that is generated privately is about 20%. So if 80% of the power is coming from private use, from private provisions, and 20% is coming from the grid, and that 20% is subsidized, can we really say that the sector is subsidized? Yes, the sector is subsidized for the amount that's coming from the grid. And every time you have a grid collapse, what do you think happens? There's no power. And so there's no subsidy, and what's left is the unsubsidized portion that we're using, which is coming from generator and increasingly solar now. So as long as we continue to delude ourselves that there is a subsidy, we're going to continue in the same track where there's not going to be an increase in supply. Because again, what we need to stabilize supply is significant investment in the sector. And if the person who is investing is waiting on the subsidy, there's a disincentive for them to invest. And I think it's really, when we start to think about it like that, right? When there is adequate supply, we can talk about subsidy. But until we have adequate supply, we're fooling ourselves if we keep talking about subsidy.
Okay, so you're talking about us not talking about subsidy, but we are made to understand that over 2 trillion now was, earmarked for, subsidy payment in the power sector last year. That's on the one hand. And on the other hand, we're made to understand that, the cost reflective amount should be over 220 naira, and it's only band A's who are paying close to that per kilowatt hour, while the other bands are paying around 60 something naira and what have you. Isn't that subsidy at the end of the day? Because I'm looking at, what this would mean for the everyday Nigerian.
For the everyday Nigerian that is getting power when 5% of the time that he wants it, let's start being honest with ourselves. The subsidy is just it's a diversion. Let's start to understand that while we will provide subsidies as a matter of policy, continuing to focus on that subsidy is really defeating the whole purpose of trying to ensure that we have universal access to electricity. We cannot define a subsidy until we define universal access.
All right, talking about universal access, that brings me to the next question. What are the top 3 challenges facing Nigeria's power sector? Is it only liquidity, and is tariff hike or cost reflective tariff the only solution to that liquidity challenge?
It's a planning challenge. Let's be honest with ourselves. It's a planning challenge. If I understood what the investment requirement was, if I understood what the market wants as a return for an investment in the electricity sector, right? If I understood what the payment or what the tariff for electricity should then be, in that wise, understanding that I need to attract investment, understanding that I need to understand what the challenges are in the sector. When I say challenges, now I'm not talking about just cash collection. I'm also talking about technical losses, right? Both from the transmission and the distribution side, and even on the generation side, and then eventually go into the collection side. Then I understand the system. Again, like I said, every time I've had, like I've said before, every time I've had discussions in the industry, it's always going to be it's a generation problem, or it's a transmission problem, or it's a distribution problem. And as long as we continue to evaluate them in silos like that, and we don't look at that integrated resource or integrated energy plan, we're not going to solve the problem. We're just going to keep talking around in circles. It's a lack of honesty, if you ask me, if we're not looking at it in an integrated manner.
Lack of honesty on whose part?
Everybody. So if I'm a distribution company and I want to say that the problem is transition, I'm not being honest. If I'm a transmission company and I want to say the problem is regeneration or distribution, I'm not being honest. We've had a central system, like I said. We've had central planning, and there is no integrated energy plan, if you will.
All right, so let's talk about the Electricity Act of 2023. You talked about it and how that we're seeing devolution and all of that. How is it coming? And do you think, or what role do you think this will play at the end of the day in ensuring better outcome in the country?
So what it does is it reveals what the problems are. So today, right, or hitherto, we've had a federal government pretending to subsidize the sector, and we've had the sector players pretending to expand access.
I'm sorry, when you say, I really need us to conclude on this. You said the government is pretending to be paying subsidy, but we are made to understand that a certain amount, was earmarked for subsidy payment. We are told that cost reflective amount is over 220 naira. Are you saying all that is not true, or all those are just numbers that are... I really want to get what you're saying right here.
So the question is simple, right? 11 years ago when we had the privatization, what was...
I guess that's the network playing a hard one on us. Well, if you can hear me, Olalere, I would really like you to continue on that trajectory and also to talk about, the Electricity Act 2023, the role the subnationals are going to play, and, talking about how that the energy mix is such that we're beginning to see a lot of, renewable energies or even generating sets playing the role right there. If you can hear me, I'd like you to please take it up from there. All right, this is quite interesting. I mean, for me, I really want to understand, where he stands, especially because we have data that points to subsidy payment. And then, okay, I hear you're back. If you can hear me, please go ahead, Olalere.
I can hear you, and like I said, the fact that subsidy payments are being made has not improved the amount of electricity that we're getting in the country. The fact that we have decided to provide Band A, Band B, Band C, and Band D has not improved the amount of electricity that we're getting. So if we're trying to solve the electricity problem, we should stop pretending that as long as we make subsidy provisions available and we announce the numbers of the subsidy, it has affected the system. If it has not, so I'm saying, let us look at the plan and let's talk about how we want to improve access to electricity rather than focus on the amount of subsidies that are being paid. That has not solved the problem, and it's not going to solve the problem.
Right. So talking about the EA 2023, which of course has to do with, devolution and decentralization, talk to us about how it's coming.
All right, so what that has done, right, is it has opened up the market. It has demonstrated, it has basically handed over regulation of the sector to the states. Now, the states cannot afford to provide subsidies. Therefore, the states have to insist that the market players run their business in a profitable way and also demonstrate that it can achieve growth, right? And also then demonstrate what the cost-reflective cost of electricity is. And if we have 36 states looking at that, we're going to get a better answer than having one entity looking at it from the federal government and trying to determine what the cost-effective price of electricity is. They have tried that for many years, and it has not worked. The fact that we have Band-Aid tariffs has not increased the amount of investments that is going on into the sector today. So I'm saying we need to be more transparent. We need to publish the numbers as we have them. We need to publish the investments that are being made, and we need to publish the expansion of access to electricity on an ongoing basis as it happens. That is what people want to see, and that's what's going to demonstrate that the sector is moving forward, not an announcement of 2.4 trillion subsidy. Those subsidies are not achieving expansion in access to electricity, as you have seen.
Interesting. I wanted to ask you if you have other figures different from what is being bandied.
No, I keep saying you're focused on the figures. Those figures don't matter. It is access that matters.
All right, Olalere Odusote, I'm afraid we'll have to end this conversation here. We have other, things lined up for today. But thank you. It's been a nice conversation with you, and I look forward to speaking with you some other time.